Chris Paul is obviously a great player. He arguably is the greatest NBA point guard of all time. He's in his 17th NBA season, and he's been in 11 All-Star games. He's a 9-time All-Defensive Player. He's 5th place all-time for steals, 3rd place all-time for assists, and he's nearly been the MVP of the league on numerous occasions. Chris Paul is a great player, and he's shown that his entire career. And he's done better than anyone could have imagined in proving his doubters wrong as of lately. So do I really think Chris Paul can play until he's 50? And could he be so crazy to actually attempt this feat? First, I want to show you the list of the oldest players in NBA history. Of the 14 oldest players in NBA history, 9 of them are either in the Hall of Fame or will be in the Hall of Fame in the near future. Udonis Haslem is the only player on this list that's currently playing, and I'm not counting him on the list of Hall of Fame players in the future. Interestingly enough, the oldest player in NBA history was Nat Hickey, who was 2 days away from playing in an NBA game at the age of 46. Nat actually wasn't a player at all, though. He was a coach of the Providence Steamrollers, and in the great year of 1947, he decided to play in 2 NBA games, and that is why he's on the top of this great list. That's just a side point, though, and as you can see, in order to be one of the oldest players in NBA history, you are likely going to have to be a Hall of Fame player. And I believe this point is even more important in today's NBA because there's so much talent in the league. I think one thing is clear though. Chris Paul is certainly an elite player, and he's certainly a Hall of Famer. I think Chris Paul is also at an advantage to have an extra long NBA career because of his play style. Paul is a high IQ basketball player, and he relies on his IQ to be valuable to his team. He is a true classic point guard that can read the floor and facilitate the game to make sure his teammates get in the right spots to get buckets. With the pass-first play style, Paul doesn't need to rely on his athleticism nearly as much as most other players, especially those who without their speed and high-flying dunks cannot provide much for their team. If you look at his stats over the years, it's really interesting to see that he's nearly getting as good stats today as he was in his prime. Although playing quite a few less minutes per game now than during his prime, his assists and steal per game averages are still incredibly high, and Paul is still a high percentage shooter. His turnover per game average is still really low, with just over 2 turnovers per game, which is impressive to see as most other players near the top of the assist per game list are over 3 and 4 turnovers per game. One statistic that Paul is getting worse at, though, is points, as this may be his worst points per game season of his career. I don't think this is a major deal for Paul's ability to stay in the league, though. And this is because he's such a great asset on other parts of the game on both the offensive and defensive ends. I also think Paul can hover between that 10 to 15 points per game mark for a few more years. And let's say he dips below the 10 points per game mark, I don't think he's automatically going to be out of the league. I think Chris Paul could honestly have below average stats as a 40-something-year-old and still be accepted in the NBA. And I think he would be accepted because of his IQ. I'm saying this just because there are some guys that have a tough time gaining a spot on an NBA roster, even if they could get average or above average stats. I'm thinking of guys like Carmelo Anthony or Isaiah Thomas, who even as they decline in their ability, are still above average basketball players that have difficulties finding a spot on a roster. In my opinion, it seems like a lot of teams would rather a no-name guy with some potential rather than an older guy that is declining in their basketball ability. I would also say that exceptions to this rule would be teams like the Nets or Lakers who are trying to win a title right now and aren't looking long-term like the Hornets and Pelicans are. Looking at Udonis Haslem, who is the 9th oldest player in NBA history and is currently playing in the NBA, I think comparing his role with the Miami Heat would be similar to the role that Chris Paul could play with the team. Udonis Haslem is pretty much a coach at this point, and he has been for a while. He's literally played 50 games over the last 6 seasons. Miami Heat coach Erik Spoelstra said of Haslem, "Everybody knows in this building, but most importantly, in that locker room, the level of impact he has. That's developing leaders in the locker room and helping teach and cultivate a culture that means something to us. I think there are a few players that can have this mentorship type of role with a team. I think being with an organization for a long time helps, as this shows that you were dedicated to the growth of that franchise in particular. Other than that, a player probably has to have good character, be liked by his teammates, and have knowledge of the game that they're willing to share, and can share in a helpful way. I think Chris Paul can do this part effectively, and I think he's already had that role on at least the Phoenix Suns and back when he was on the Oklahoma City Thunder a couple seasons ago. Paul has also showed that he is a great leader by being the head of the NBA's Player Association for 8 years. Recently, Mikal Bridges, one of Chris Paul's current teammates, said, "Chris Paul has this IQ that's going to keep him on the floor till he's 50. Now, do I think Bridges means this literally? No. But Bridges was alluding to the fact that Paul has a unique ability and skill set that could keep him in the NBA for a long, long time. To be clear, I don't think Chris Paul will stay in the NBA till he's 50 years old. However, if there's any player that could possibly do it in the history of the NBA, it may be him. I can't see someone reaching the mark of playing till they're 50 until there's a better way to combat all of the flaws that come with aging. And there'd also have to be someone that would want to be in the NBA for almost 30 years. For Paul, he'd have to play another 9 seasons in the NBA just to be the oldest player in NBA history. I personally like watching Chris Paul play, and I hope he'll stay in the league for years to come. Do you think Chris Paul could stay in the league until he's 50? Do you even think this is possible in the modern day NBA? Let me know what you think in the comments section. Remember to like and subscribe with the notification bell, and thanks for watching.